The walls of Clarence House trembled with tension. Inside, a storm was brewing, not political, but deeply personal. Prince William had been summoned urgently, only to find Camilla standing guard, refusing him entry to his own father's side. Her calm, rehearsed words about managing the situation landed like cold steel, while Charles, frail and hidden away, remained out of reach. William's patience cracked. His grief, fear, and decades of buried resentment ignited into something raw and unstoppable. His voice rose, echoing through the grand drawing room. "He's my father, not yours." In that instant, the monarchy's carefully polished mask slipped, revealing the fragile human emotions beneath. What happened next would change everything. If you're captivated by these unseen royal moments, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more stories that peel back the curtain on the crown. And if you know someone who follows the royals closely, share this video with them. They'll thank you later. The morning light spilled gently across the gardens of Kensington Palace, but for Prince William it did little to soften the weight pressing against his chest. The phone call that came earlier had been brief, clinical, and loaded with meaning. "Your immediate presence is required at Clarence House." Immediate. That word alone told him everything. Royal schedules are designed with padding, with space for diplomacy. Immediate meant the ground beneath him had shifted, and it had. Behind those closed palace doors, whispers had been circling for weeks. King Charles's cancelled engagements, explained away as scheduling conflicts had started to pile up. His once tireless energy was dimming. Those who saw him closely spoke of fatigue, of quiet moments when his hands trembled as he signed papers. Few dared to voice the suspicion aloud, but the truth was becoming harder to ignore. The king was gravely ill. For William, that reality was devastating. Not only was he a son, but also the heir, staring at a future that might arrive far sooner than anyone had prepared for. And yet, instead of walking straight to his father, he found someone else waiting for him. Camilla. She stood tall in the drawing room at Clarence House, her back to the sunlight streaming through the windows. Every detail about her posture was deliberate, poised, graceful, carefully composed. But William knew better. Behind that composure was fear. "Your father is resting," she told him, her tone smooth but unyielding. And then, almost casually, she shifted her position to block the door to Charles's study. That subtle movement, that refusal, cut through William like a blade. He wasn't here as a dignitary. He wasn't here as the Prince of Wales. He was here as a son. Yet his stepmother was filtering access to his own father. Camilla insisted there were circumstances he needed to understand before he saw Charles. Her words dripped with protocol, with that ever-present weight of the institution. For William, it felt like history repeating itself. Once again, human connection was being sacrificed at the altar of royal image management. But this time, he wasn't a boy standing silently in the shadow of adult choices. He was a man, a father, a husband, and the heir to the throne. "Camilla," he said, his voice steady but sharp. "I need to see him, now." She didn't move. Instead, she delivered the news that Charles had cancer. It was advanced, and the prognosis was grim. Her words were rehearsed, softened by careful phrasing. Cautiously optimistic, treatment options, managing the information. But William heard what she wasn't saying. His father was dying. The shock hit him with brutal clarity. Inside, grief clawed at his chest. But layered on top was fury. Why was he only learning this now? Why had the truth been packaged, delayed, softened, managed? Who had decided he wasn't ready to hear about his own father's condition until this carefully staged moment? The more Camilla spoke, the more he felt the invisible machinery of monarchy turning around him. Words like communication strategy, public timing, succession optics. It all felt cold, calculated, as if his father, Aka's suffering was nothing more than a press release waiting to be approved. For William, this was unbearable. His father wasn't just the king, he was the man who had raised him, who had guided him through grief after Diana's death, who had shown him the meaning of duty. Now, the chance to simply sit beside him, to look into his eyes and hear the truth directly, was being stalled by palace choreography. At that moment, William's restraint began to crack. Years of tension, of watching his father's marriage to Camilla, of living with the public narratives about his family, of biting his tongue for the sake of harmony, all of it began to simmer dangerously close to the surface. And yet, even in his anger, he saw something unexpected in her. Camilla's mask slipped for just a heartbeat. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles pale, her eyes glassy with unspoken worry. She too was frightened. She too loved Charles, but that recognition did little to dull William's fury. The palace walls were closing in. Protocol was suffocating him. He could feel the weight of centuries pressing down, duty demanding silence, image demanding patience, while his father's life was slipping away upstairs. And William, no longer willing to be managed, no longer willing to be kept in the dark, was reaching his breaking point. The silence in the drawing room stretched, heavy and unspoken. Outside, London bustled as if nothing had changed, but inside Clarence House, the air was thick with unvoiced truths and repressed emotions, and when those emotions finally erupted, they would shake the royal family to its very core. The silence in Clarence House was suffocating. Heavy curtains muted the sounds of London outside, leaving only the ticking of an antique clock and the low, steady hum of tension that seemed to vibrate through the room. William stood tall, his eyes locked on Camilla, every muscle in his body tight with restrained fury. For a lifetime he had been schooled in composure. Royals do not scream, royals do not flinch, royals endure, but royals are also human. And in that moment it wasn't a prince who stood before the queen consort. It was a son, denied his right to his father. Camilla's words still echoed. We must manage this carefully. The institution comes first. The institution. That phrase had been William's invisible shadow since childhood. It was the reason he had been forced to grieve Diana in public at just 15. The reason family arguments were disguised as differences of opinion. The reason his father's illness was now being filtered through protocols and strategies instead of spoken plainly from father to son. His voice broke the silence, quiet at first but trembling with power. Stop. Stop managing me. Stop managing him. Camilla stiffened, her lips parting as if to defend herself. But William's voice rose, each word sharper than the last. You're telling me my father is dying, and you think I need your permission to see him? The air in the drawing room cracked like glass under pressure. Years of swallowed resentment spilled free. His childhood memories of watching his parents' marriage collapse, the endless headlines, the quiet compromises he had made for peace. All of it poured into his voice. He's my father. William's shout reverberated against the high ceilings. My father, not yours. You don't get to choreograph my grief. Camilla flinched. For the first time, her polished mask shattered. Her voice, when it came, was no longer regal but raw. You think I don't know what this means? You think I'm not terrified too? I have loved him for more years than you realize, through scandal and exile, through every storm. And now I am watching him fade before my eyes. Her words hung heavy in the air, trembling with honesty. Tears welled, spilling despite her effort to contain them. For just a moment William saw not the queen consort, but a woman, desperate to hold on to the man she loved. The clash of emotions stunned him. His rage, born of grief, collided with her sorrow, born of fear. Both of them were standing on opposite sides of the same wound. Still, his need was undeniable. He would not let palace walls or carefully staged conversations come between him and his father. I don't care about strategy. I don't care about timing. I need to see him. Camilla's shoulders sank. She no longer blocked the door. She no longer tried to control the moment. With a trembling hand, she gestured toward Charles's study. He's waiting for you. When William opened that door, the world shifted. Inside, the king sat behind his desk, surrounded by papers and photographs. But the sight of him stopped William cold. His father, once so full of energy, so constant in his devotion to duty, looked pale, diminished. His hands trembled as he set down a pen, yet when Charles lifted his eyes, the warmth was still there, the same warmth that had guided William through scraped knees, through military service, through fatherhood. "Sit, my boy." And there, in that quiet study, father and son faced the truth together. Charles spoke plainly. Pancreatic cancer, advanced, with months rather than years ahead. The words landed like stones in William's chest. He had always known this day would come, but knowing and living it were two very different things. They talked of duty, of the children, of Kate. They spoke of the monarchy's future. But beneath it all was something far more fragile. Love, regret, forgiveness. William, for the first time in decades, called him Papa. The moment was not just a passing of information. It was a passing of weight. The invisible crown grew heavier on William's shoulders, even as his father tried to shield him from its full burden. When he left the study, he was no longer the same man. He was no longer just a son. He was an heir preparing for inevitability. Camilla was waiting. Their earlier fury lingered in the air, but something softer had taken root too. Not friendship, not forgiveness, but recognition. Two people bound by their love for the same man, finally understanding that survival meant facing the storm together. Later, as William returned to Kensington Palace, the world outside looked unchanged. London traffic flowed, children laughed in the parks, life continued. But inside his car, William broke down in private. The sobs of a son who had just learned time was slipping through his fingers. The scream in Clarence House had not been just rage. It had been grief, disguised in fury. And it was the sound of a monarchy bracing for change it could not yet bear to face. In the quiet halls of Clarence House, one truth became painfully clear. Behind the polished titles, the royal crowns, and the centuries of tradition, this was still just a family, fractured, fragile, and desperately clinging to each other in the face of loss. William's scream wasn't just fury at Camilla. It was the cry of a son who felt time slipping away, who wanted his father without filters, without palace protocol, without the suffocating weight of the institution. And Camilla, the woman long painted as the villain in this story, was revealed as something else entirely. A wife terrified of losing the man she had fought to stand beside for decades. Two people, on opposite sides of history, finally saw the same truth. As Charles battles his illness, the future of the monarchy hangs in the balance. But for William, the crown is no longer just a destiny. It's a countdown. And in those rare moments when the palace curtains are pulled back, we are reminded that even kings and queens cannot escape the raw, unrelenting power of being human.